Welcome to This Just In, the show bringing you the latest advancements in healthcare, strategy, innovation, and public policy. And now, for the fastest voice in healthcare, here's your host, Justin Barnes.
Thank you for tuning in. Welcome to This Just In. I'm your host, Justin Barnes. In these episodes, I bring you the latest advancements in healthcare, strategy, innovation, and leadership. As always, we're broadcasting from the This Just In studios on the Business Radio X network, the Healthcare Now Radio network, and our newest broadcast partner, the Health Podcast Network. For this episode, my 357th show, I have a very special episode, not just because of its content, but also inviting back a very special longtime friend, 30-year friend, onto the broadcast. Welcome, Beth Friedman.
Thank you, Justin. Glad to be on your show.
Absolutely. Is this the first time you've been on my show?
I think we did one a while back when you had your studio still in Atlanta.
Yes.
And we were just all getting ready to go to HIMSS, and we were talking about HIMSS.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of why we're here today. So we're going to use this as a fall preview show. I know I'll see you next week at the Georgia HIMSS annual conference in Atlanta, just north of Atlanta at the Gath South Center. But also a lot of great conferences coming up, a lot of great energy in the industry. So was very excited. Thank you so much for this, last minute invitation to come on. I just thought of this show with Roberta on what can we do to kind of share some of the great things that are happening this fall, get everybody kind of excited again for what we're about to walk into as an industry. It's always fun to be with 5, 10, 15, 20,000 of your closest friends wrapped around, some great topics, innovation, strategy, all that good stuff for the industry. So obviously you're very excited for this.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, I'm going to be headed to Becker's too here, Becker's IT conference, as well as some of the others that you mentioned. Yeah, we have a big lineup this fall.
Love it. So I guess let's talk about, before we talk specifically about, Georgia HIMSS, Chime, Becker's, and some of the other items, but feel free to bring up anything that you're coming across, because that's kind of the point is there might be some shows, certainly for specific segments. I'd go some of the larger shows, like obviously health in Chime, but there could be some specific shows, and that's some of your expertise also that you have. And we'll dive into, a little bit about your background throughout the show. Again, we both come, I think what's really neat is we both come from, I think, HBO and Company around 1994-ish, 5-ish.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And then we all, made the transition to McKesson.
Yep, absolutely. And then, but so we've been around a lot, and so we cover a lot of ground in the industry. The industry's evolved a lot. And obviously HIMSS has been one of the mainstays in the industry. Again, we'll be at Georgia HIMSS next week in Atlanta. But there's some other great shows too. But so in this broadcast, let's, feel free to share specifically some of the more maybe niche shows that you come across that we don't necessarily talk about. And I may not be at some of those more niche shows, but I'd love for you to bring them up and feel free to talk about that.
Sure.
So, and again, what do you think some of the themes, before we dive in specifically about, Georgia HIMSS or Becker's or Health or Chime, what are some of the themes that you think we're going to see this fall?
The prevalent theme still, I think, will be AI. It was last year. It maybe even was the year before that, Justin. I don't know, but I see it a little bit, morphing, evolving, which is as it should, right? So now I think that the conversation will be around proof points. Like, what's the proven use case? What organization is doing it? What have they achieved? I think it's also going to be around building trust, because I think we still have a generation of clinicians and other healthcare executives and staff members that just are very non-trusting yet. And, probably for good cause, right? There's for good reason. And then I think looking in 26, I think we're all going to be talking about achieving ROI with this, return on investment, after we've been dabbling in it for 1, 2, maybe 3 years. So that's definitely AI is one. The good news I think I'm also seeing around that topic is the responsible use of AI. So we've got CHI, we've got TRAIN, we've got, I think the AMA just came out with some guidelines. NIH has some guidelines. So I'm glad to see all these it's going to be tough to put guardrails around this. It moves so fast, but I'm glad to see that happening. So that's definitely one area.
Yep. Yeah. And I agree. I think this new MIT article is circulating where I don't want to give out, I don't want to be an alarmist or anything like that, but the ROI really hasn't been seen by significantly most around AI. However, I think it's a little bit unfair. I think they're just kind of setting up, make sure that you have the right use case. And actually, I just published a whole playbook on this and where people can kind of start But start small. Start with some specific use cases that best advance your organization or can show the maximum ROI in a minimum amount of time for your organization. It doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be this monstrosity project. It can be just in one little sector of a division of a group or anything like that. But start small, and I think that way we have more, first of all, measurable results, hopefully more quickly, more focus, and we can, it's okay to fail fast in those type of environments. Fail safe is really, really important, obviously, with AI and certainly in healthcare. There's a lot of components. There's some best practices there that, I've been speaking about a lot, and I think that's really important. We will start to see the ROI if you follow some better tenets. I think to your point, things are moving so fast. People just kind of go forward. People are sold something, and then it may not be, they may not have put all of the background behind it or got the right leadership wrapped around it. Maybe not the right guardrails, to your point. I think there's a lot of areas where we will get better. But certainly, we all know it's the future. It's probably going to be a significant piece of almost everything that we do. I talk about, even in the playbook, AI in our business use, really important. I just started Stanford 2 days ago, basically on this exact topic, and try to, make sure I have AI for the best playbook for me, my business, and my entities like that. But also personally, we're going to use AI. So it's not going anywhere. It's going to be more prevalent, more important in our lives long term. So I think it's why I agree with you. And I think we're going to see more of this and more best practices shared coming up.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. The other topic I'm really interested, is this whole interoperability pledge that happened in DC. I know you're having some conversations around that. To vendors I've talked to, we had 2 of our clients there. What's next? These companies already had interoperability on their roadmap, and they have for years. So what's going to make a difference? What's really going to push this based on this latest administrative interest in moving our industry forward? So that's another one I think is the interoperability. And then, something that relates to AI actually is data quality. So I've also heard that as organizations are getting more into the AI solutions, they're learning that the integrity and the quality of that data that's feeding those systems has to really be a priority and be a focus. So, as a former medical record person for many, many years, that's near and dear to my heart, and that accuracy of the documentation and the data in our EHR. So I think that'll be more of a focus this year for sure.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Data integrity, making sure when you create and I think this is the direction you're going to, but also when you're creating your large language lab or your LLM, you've got to make sure you know the sources that it's pulling from, and they're curated, peer-reviewed, expert, your content that it could be your thought leadership potentially, or either that you're pulling from thought leaders that you know and trust, and again, peer-reviewed, certainly in the medical industry. It's critically important because we knew this years ago, setting up these big databases 20, 30 years ago, garbage in, garbage out. So if you don't curate your sources of data, you don't have a powerful AI infrastructure, and you will absolutely be either surpassed or usurped by somebody else who did create this from the start. And it's never too late to kind of restart, because that data, that knowledge, that infrastructure is everything. That's everything going forward. That is your root. So make sure your root and your foundation is strong, because it's certainly in healthcare, it's really, really important. So I think that's basically, you agree with that too.
100%, 100%. And then, sort of the undercurrent, I think, of all the conferences this year, Justin, is really going to be the financial concerns. I feel like we say that every year. Like, I feel like financial concerns in healthcare are a concern, challenge every year. But this year, it feels a little bit different. HFMA just came out with a report yesterday. It doesn't paint a good picture. If we get fewer patients covered, whether that's Medicaid cutbacks, ACA cutbacks, whatever it might be, that's less reimbursement, that's more charity care, that's more patient bad debt. So I think, and then couple that kind of with how the payers and plans are getting so much more aggressive with what they're not covering. I do think that's going to be that underlying current of everything that happens in the year ahead.
Yep. No, excellent point. Let's shift gears a little bit here. Well, first of all, what shows did I not mention or do I not have on the radar screen, even for me? Any niche shows that I'm missing this fall, or even
Sure. Given my background, I've got a couple, right?
Yep.
Well, I went to a cardiology one a few weeks ago. That was so cool. Heart Rhythm Society. I'd never heard about it or known about it, but it's all the data. Talk about data. Oh my gosh. All the data that comes out of pacemakers, Holter monitors, wearables. I mean, just all this data that's related to arrhythmias is really overwhelming. And it was an eye opener for me. So that was a good one. And they have their main event, I think, is in March or April next year in Chicago. But also talking about clinical integrity, there's one for clinical documentation integrity this week called NARI.
Okay.
NAHRI. It's on revenue integrity.
Okay.
And that all starts with documentation integrity. I'll be going to AHIMA, the Health Information Management Association, which is my professional credential and background. What else is coming up? I think you mentioned the others that are kind of in our group's schedule for the fall.
Absolutely. No, great. No, that's actually very interesting about the data, and certainly in the cardiology specialty. That's neat. Where was that conference?
It was here in Atlanta, Justin. Okay. Actually, it was right across from Mercedes-Benz Stadium, which I had not been to. You probably have. I don't know.
Yep.
And I did the tour. I took the time to do the tour. It was fantastic.
Did you bring Cal? I think you did.
I did. I did.
I saw pictures. That's right. I did. I saw pictures.
It was a great mom-son outing. If anybody out there wants to do a mom-son outing, it's a good one.
Love it. So shifting gears a little bit here, you have a lot of expertise, certainly trade shows, marketing, PR, conferences. Talk about some of your best practices. First of all, as companies go, and these are large investments for organizations and have gotten a lot larger investments over time and much more expensive to go. Certainly, as you rack up, it's not just about the fee to be on the show floor, but there's just travel costs and hotel, and it's extensive. No matter who you are, it's an expensive proposition.
Absolutely.
So what do you think, I would say, leaders need to walk away with today that they didn't prioritize 5 or 10 years ago with some of these conferences?
Yeah, I'm going to talk about it from two perspectives, the vendor perspective and the healthcare executive perspective. I think from a healthcare executive perspective, a lot of them will go there to speak. Right. And they'll go there for their speech and they'll leave.
Right.
And I think that's kind of sad because there's an opportunity there to, I would say, make those personal one-on-one, peer-to-peer conversations happen. Whether they're scheduled, whether you join a focus group or a roundtable, or there's a lot of the organizations and the events now I'm seeing sponsor these types of smaller groups. And I think those kind of peer-to-peer conversations are actually even more important today than ever. So I'm big on those. We often suggest to our clients to become a sponsor so that they can host a roundtable or a focus group at the conference. So I like those a lot. And that gives those executives that one-on-one time to really talk with their peers. So I would say keep seeking out those personal relationship conversations.
Excellent. Yeah, and I would be honest with you, I kind of used to do that back 15 years ago or so. I might go in somewhere, do my talk, and then leave. But now I sit in more sessions than ever before. I'm learning more. There's so much to learn. I mean, because I go to a lot of different, I go to the, obviously HIMSS and health and Vive and all those, but then I also, I work a lot with AWS and Dell and stuff. So I go to their conferences as well. And I learn a ton about the industry, and I've learned so much. That's actually what made me go to Stanford. Was there's so much to learn about AI, and I'm always learning the little drips and drabs. I need to take a step back and learn it holistically, kind of from the ground up. And so, and sitting in these sessions, I learned that. So I learned what was really cool is I learned what I didn't know, which, I mean, I know that's an oxymoron in a way, but I learned what I didn't know in a way that, oh my gosh, I really need to focus in some of these areas. And it's extremely interesting. And I love to learn. So now I get so much out of these conferences, more than just going to speak and what that brings to me, but then also learning again from your peers and meeting new people. You meet some really interesting people, which we may not, certainly as we're all scattered, we may work remotely now more days than ever before. So being in these conferences is such a great opportunity. And I always say, and I know you'll agree with this, these conferences are what you make it. You cannot have a bad conference. If you have a bad conference, that's absolutely on you. Yeah. So there's every opportunity in the world for anything that you want to achieve. If you put the strategy together, you have the right framework, and that all takes planning, pre-planning, and then you go and execute, and you take the time to execute and execute well. So.
One of the things I've noticed about speaker sessions, because I love going to them also, right? I love doing those wrap-ups from the sessions. And the ones that are case study sessions, especially if there's a panel, they're fantastic, right? You like what 3 different organizations are all doing to address the same problem. They're all doing it in different ways, but you learn something from each and every one of them. And what I've noticed is just the past year or two, especially at like HIMSS, I noticed and Vive, the line afterward for questions longer and longer and longer. I don't know how many are vendors just trying to introduce themselves and how many are actual attendees, but I've noticed that as well.
Yeah, I don't recommend that. I don't think that's a classy strategy to get up there and try to promote your product from the microphone. Those are really meant for expert opinions, thought leadership, and getting questions answered. So anyhow, yeah, I want to put that out there.
I know. I wouldn't encourage sales guys to do that. No.
I cringe every time someone does that. So what are, and kind of let's maximize the impact. We talk about the costs have certainly grown. It's very expensive. Again, no matter who you are, everybody cares about the money that it costs to go to these shows. No one says, oh, blank check, no problem. I don't care if you're, again, AWS, Dell, a small vendor. It doesn't matter. Everybody cares. Even when we were at HBO and McKesson, we cared. People always cared. So how do you maximize impact? And I say that, what are some of the best ways that you've seen organizations extend the value of their trade show investments, from booth conversions to panels, receptions, and well beyond the event itself?
I always have told clients, Justin, I think it always proves true. I look at it as a three-legged stool.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to go to a conference, invest in 3 ways, maybe 4. Have a booth. It doesn't have to be a big one, though. I think people are getting away from these huge booths, so it doesn't have to be huge. Get a speaking session, and that, unfortunately, it usually happens a year ahead of time. I mean, there's a long roadway to get to that. So, keep an eye on that conference. When their call for speakers is out, include one of your customers. It's so much more important to have your customers versus your executives every single time, right? And then the other thing is, find a small way to sponsor the event. I think if you can do those 3 things, and that sponsorship, like I said, I like the roundtables, the focus groups. If sponsor a speaking session, sponsor a track, sponsor a sort of a specific group, like this AHIMA one coming up. They're having a half-day coding workshop type thing, and there's a sponsor for all that education because that's their target audience. So look for opportunities with the event that really hit on your target audience. So I really like those 3.
Yep. Excellent. Yeah, and I think absolutely hosting, as much as you can around the strategy. Again, you bring up the prongs that are critically important. But I also see a lot of the pre-work that goes in. So you said just even starting a year in advance, which is very, very important to maximize the ROI. And then just make sure that your team is well prepped. And there's a lot of best practices around even having short conversations. So you kind of maximize the lead opportunity at the booth, but then also you're walking around and you have your head up and you're actually meeting, the right people that you can. The other piece is really focus more, and this is something, you and I talk about, focus on thought leadership and not necessarily sales. And this goes back to your submitting a speaker series to speak at one of these conferences, that you're really focused on thought leadership. You bring in your customer, like you said, you have true metrics and ROI, what's being, how you evolve in the care strategy, what's the tangible benefit to the provider or to the organization. And then, you're bringing your thought leadership along with that. That's your best chance of getting selected. It can't be a marketing pitch. A lot of people, I would say 70-80% are more marketing pitches, and they can see right through that.
Absolutely. And that actually, those won't get accepted now.
Right.
I mean,
yeah.
if it's a high quality conference event, they're not going to accept a sales pitch. So, don't even try. Really.
Yeah. And it brings up another point. It wasn't part of how I built this show, but I was having a conversation with somebody, and this kind of feeds well into you and what you know in your past. I was in New York last week, joining the board of a company, and I asked them, why me specifically is the right independent member? And he said, because they're deploying AI and they're doing extremely well. It's like AI has made the barrier to building a product significantly less. Like maybe it's 50 to 60% easier to build a product, a platform today because of AI. And he's like, however, there's a lot more products out there because of this. They don't have this. We need somebody who can raise us above the fray, who can help, who has a brand and can build a brand bigger, can go to market more strategically. And I never heard it articulated like that before. And then I'm like, that's why, my opportunity has continued to grow. And that's exactly, I think it fits right into what you're doing, is guiding your customers into, hey guys, this is how you rise above the noise. This is how you get above the fray. This is how you break through. These are the ways to go to market. And it makes a big difference. And though I kind of, I guess it is kind of common sense if you take a step back and look, going, yeah, there is more technology than ever before. There's so much more noise, but you have to break through. And it's a great opportunity for you and I and what we do on a daily basis. So what do you think about that?
I think you're absolutely true, and I think it's going to only get more important. So one of the things you and I chatted about before show was the use of, now you guys all see it, answer engines versus search engines. When you go out and you do a search, it's giving you an AI answer now, right? So what's that answer? Like, how do they generate that? It's GEO, so generative engine optimization versus SEO. And we're seeing that shift. And those engines think a little bit differently. And they are absolutely 100% not just looking for keywords. They are looking for what they call authoritative voices. So are you establishing that authoritative voice in your sector? And that's going to be the goal.
Yeah, and I can give you a proof point. I was didn't happen. I was in, again, New York last week, and then I went to the Greenwich Polo Club for a game on that Sunday. Well, that Tuesday, no, that we were not connected at all. I got an outreach from a private equity firm from Greenwich, and I said, "Oh my gosh, I was just there," but we did not meet. But it's exactly what you're talking about. They said, "Hey, we've been doing a lot of chronic care management research, and your name keeps on coming up, and we love the content. We agree with what you put out there." And we'd love to talk. And actually, I spoke with them yesterday, and it was a great conversation. And I'll probably assist them in various capacities. But to your point, they found me through the authority of voice out there in the chronic care management CCM space. So,
And, my advice to technology companies is have an expert on hand, right? Have an expert on the team. Put him or her in your executive suite. Use their name on things. Get them out there. Let them be that authoritative voice and build that credibility. It's going to be absolutely essential.
yeah. Excellent. So let's dive into some of your, you've been one of the biggest experts, in auditing and denials and in that whole revenue cycle world for many decades, a few decades, a few decades at this point. So payer audits and denials remain, one of the biggest challenges for health systems. What strategies are you proving most effective for staying ahead of these pressures? I know you've done some great reading on this, certainly with the AI. So share your thoughts.
Oh man. Health systems are continuing to have to fight this battle, and I don't see it. I don't see it ebbing anytime soon. I think it's just going to continue to be more difficult, especially as in the news the past few months, payers, health plans, providers, they're not doing so well as they maybe used to a year ago financially. They're looking for ways to cut costs, and one of the ways is denials, right? So unfortunately, I think the hardest part for providers is that payers are continually changing the rules of the game. So it's that instability. It's that, so one of my pieces of advice would be either find a partner, use technology, hire a team, whatever it takes to keep up with all your payers and all those coding rules, because they are so in the weeds, Justin. I mean, you can't even imagine. And the other thing is the negotiations. When you're negotiating a managed care contract, negotiating with your payers, really look at those contracts. I mean, some of these contracts have been out there for decades. Nobody looks back at them. Nobody's like sort of mining all that data in those contracts to say, what can we really do to make sure we're getting our best fair end of the deal with the payer and with the payers. So that's another area where I think we're going to see some use of technology, is to try and get better around negotiations and contracting. And then back what I mentioned, the clinical documentation and the revenue integrity, super important. Let's try and figure out, where are we losing money? What's those target areas from the payers? And maybe assign a team even to do pre-bill reviews, right? Let's just make sure we have the cleanest possible information getting sent.
Yep. Excellent. And I want to validate your point, because I probably make this more public once they do. But I was on the phone with one of the board members from the largest health system in the New Orleans area. I won't say their name. I want to say the number was staggering. $9 million they saved by deploying AI in the revenue cycle. $9 million.
Wow.
So for a health system like that, so to your point, make sure the providers are doing that as well. And I did ask, can I make this public? And they said, yeah, absolutely. We're about to start publish records on this and all that. It's staggering. So there's so much opportunity. To your point, the payers are doing it. You need to do it as a provider organization.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. One of my clients' customers is a large health system here in Atlanta. I won't name any names, but I'm sure you're familiar with them. And they're just doing a great job, because they're really focusing on like using the data analytics, really diving into the data. What are we getting denied on? What are the trends, whether it's a diagnosis, a physician, a service line, whatever it might be, and where can we preemptively put people, time, resources to make sure to prevent these denials from happening. And they are, every month they identify, here's $1 million we're going to save this month by doing this. And it's really helping them quite a bit.
Yep. No, excellent point. It's very true. Well, I can't believe I'm about to say this, but we are at time. I got to wrap up the show.
We had 3 more questions.
I know we have a lot more content. Well, I guess you probably knew this was going to go this way better than I did, but I love it. I'm going to have you actually going to help me open the Georgia HIMSS show next week, so that'll be fun. So we'll get back on, and we'll have to have you back on again. We'll maybe make this a every 4 or 5 month thing that we talk about what's coming up, because I think you're spot on with your insights, and you're always great.
I love it, Justin. Thanks for having me on the show, and I will see you in Atlanta.
You got it shortly here. And as always, thank you for collaborating with me. And thank you to everyone for joining and listening, and also who voted us 2024 Podcast of the Year. We are so grateful. Please tune in as this show broadcasts weekdays at 2:30 p.m. Eastern, 11:30 a.m. Pacific. As always, you can find me on LinkedIn at Justin T. Barnes, or track me on Twitter at HIT Advisor, and use the hashtag ThisJustinRadio so we can respond to your comments from the show. If you missed any of this episode or want to hear more, all my shows are posted at YouTube, Spotify, Apple iTunes, Amazon Music, Megaphone, SoundCloud, iHeartRadio, and TuneIn. And we just published a couple new case studies and ROI studies at justinbarnes.com on the industry. So feel free to check that out as well. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.